We'd like to welcome you to today's webinar, Introducing Microsoft Dynamics GP 2015. Just a couple of housekeeping items to mention before we start. All attendees are in listen-only mode, so if you do have any questions throughout, you can either raise your hand, which is located in the right, there's a GoToWebinar dashboard. It should show up on your top right portion of your screen. Or you can submit a question through your question box there. There's a space for that as well. And our presenter today, Jeff, will be answering questions throughout the presentation, as well as at the end in case you think of anything later. So I'm going to pass it over to Jeff Smith. He's a solutions architect here, and he will be today's presenter for us.
Okay, well, thank you everyone for taking the time out of your busy afternoon to visit with us. I think that you'll be very pleased with some of the new developments that Microsoft has put into Dynamics GP 2015. Our hope is to highlight some of those key new benefits. Our agenda really is to start off with the Microsoft roadmap for Dynamics GP and then talk about what's new in the product. We're going to talk about some of the key benefits. We'll talk about some of the system-wide features, and then we'll focus in on some of the financials, distribution, HR, and payroll, and then also talk about a companion app that goes along with Dynamics GP. A lot of what I'm going to show you today will be at a high level, talking through slide decks. I will take some time to spend a little bit of time in the product as well so that you can see that. So anyway, certainly feel free to interact as we go along and make sure that this is as valuable as possible for you. So first of all, what I wanted to do is start off and talk about the Dynamics GP roadmap. For many of you who have been using the product for quite some time, you probably know that there have been significant changes and an evolution with the product over the last several years. So you can see that our roadmap starts back in 2012 with the release of GP 2013, and some of the significant pieces there were the release of the web client, and that's going to continue to play a very significant role as the product continues to evolve. Also, there were there's an evolution toward hosting and cloud-based solution, and also the introduction of the Business Analyzer, which I am going to spend a couple minutes with you on today. So then we're going to move on to the the year 2013, and there were then releases of the web client. The modules groups were added over time, some additional functionality. Also the introduction of the Azure concept with Dynamics GP. And then as we get to more current times in 2014, the release of R2. Many of you may already be on Dynamics GP 2013 R2. And we're going to talk about some of the pieces that were added there and also the evolution of that. Notice on with R2 there is the mention of GP Workspace and Office 365. And please, over the next period of time, please keep your eyes open for continued evolution of how GP and Office 365 work together. So if you're not using Office 365 today, certainly keep your eyes open and see that there will be many ways that that will be very beneficial to your organization. So now what I wanted to talk about then is the release of GP 2015. There were significant functionality changes, many of which we'll talk about today. The idea of identity management continues to evolve. You'll notice with the release of Dynamics GP R2, we mentioned Workflow V1, and version 2 of Workflow is even more expansive, and we are going to take some time to not only talk about that but give you a look at it. Another thing that's really important is the Business Analyzer. I'll talk a little bit about the Business Analyzer and how it can affect your business and be beneficial for individuals across your organization, whether they be GP users or not. And then we're going to talk about the topic of service-based architecture. And so with the advent of mobility applications and with phones and tablets, Microsoft is moving Dynamics GP in a way that will allow them to interact very nicely. And then, as you can see, as time goes along, Microsoft has come into a new release rhythm. So Dynamics GP 2015 was released in December. We're now in February. You should expect that you'll see some new release or addendums to GP 2015 sometime before mid-year. And then you'll see something in addition as time goes into the end of this year. So there is pretty much a 6-month pattern where new add-ons and features and functionality is being added to the product. Now, what this means is that it's really important for you to stay on top of things, and that's really our responsibility is to help you do that. So just because a new release comes out doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to want to jump to it right away, because it may not provide anything that's really functional for you. So as we go through time, make sure that you keep keep your eyes on the new releases and the new functionality, and we'll try to keep you as up to date as we possibly can as we go along. And I do know that someone just asked a question about the slide presentation, and I do want to make sure that you know that that will be out on the Socius website, and we'll make sure that you know where it is to get it, because we do feel like this is an important topic for you. All right, so enough of the roadmap for now, but just keep in mind that some of the new functionality around being able to access your data and provide it in meaningful ways to your employees, the advent of workflow starting in GP 2013 R2, interaction with Office 365 and with applications that you may find on your tablet or your phone are going to continue to evolve and really be a bigger and bigger part of how you operate and use GP. One last thing that I wanted to make sure that we talked about also with the Business Analyzer is that with the release of GP 2015, you now have the ability to access that information not just via Windows, but also via Apple and Android environments. All right, so really a couple really highlighted points that I wanted to make sure we talked about. First of all, expanded workflows. And some of you may be using some of the workflows that have existed in Dynamics GP over recent years, taking advantage of what we call the business portal. So these new workflows are actually going to be embedded in Dynamics GP, and they're going to help you streamline financial, purchasing, sales, payroll, and even project-related approvals. So anything from batch approvals to people being able to go in and update their employee profile information for our payroll and HR users. Those types of things are going to continue to evolve and be added to the solution. Another thing that's become more and more important is the ability to have a single sign-on. So as many of you that have used GP for some time know that to log into GP, you may log into your environment. You have a network password. You may have a SQL password. You also have a Dynamics GP password. With the advent of Azure and the advent of the web client, we're coming up with new ways to allow you to have a single but secure login into Dynamics GP. And then lastly, and we talked about this for just a moment, the service-based architecture. And this is really going to be beneficial for us in regards to allowing us to have more and more availability to applications that are on our tablets and our phones, and being able to have workflow and fundamental information available via that method. So what I first wanted to start off with was some of the system-wide features. And so to start that off, I'm going to talk about what is service-based architecture. And for many of you, like me, I I'm not I'm not a technical resource. I'm more on the application and accounting side. So I really get debits and credits, but sometimes the technology makes my head spin. But the idea behind and the advantages that we have working with Microsoft as a part of their product line is we have the best of both worlds. So not only do we have great accounting and business management solutions, but they're also secure and they're based on great technology. So GP now is going to be able to be a much more robust solution in regards to mobile applications, and we'll be talking about in the future applications such as being able to enter a timesheet via my phone or updating a project, those types of things. We'll be able to do all of that. And then it's also providing a much easier environment for development resources to niche the product for you to make sure that it's even more closely aligned with your day-to-day operations. We talked about the identity management functionality, allowing you to have a single sign-on into Dynamics GP. Many of you may be saying, well, what does that do for me? I'm not on Azure. I'm not using the web client. One of the my key messages back to you would be make sure that you're talking to your consultant that you work with, finding out how the web client may provide benefit for you. It does provide great value for many of our clients, although not everyone, and so we will help you make a good decision on whether a migration to a web client atmosphere would be good for you. And then also, we do have clients that are making the migration to Azure, which is Microsoft's cloud, or hosting environments, and we want to make sure that you're aware of those and what the benefits may be for you as well. One of the things that you'll notice on this window is what's called an organizational account. So for those using Dynamics GP in the Azure environment, the organizational account allows you to really tie all of your individual logins that you have today into really one login. So when you log into your environment, it ties you to your Dynamics GP, it ties you to your SQL Server, and any of the other logins that you have, so that really you have a single login. And so when you launch Dynamics GP, it won't prompt you for user ID and password because it knows who you are and it's very secure. So you're not really compromising the integrity of your data or the security of the solution, but really still making time easier for you. All right, so another system-wide feature is really revolving around the Dynamics GP workflow. So this is really, as you remember from a slide that I showed you previously, this is version 2 of the Dynamics GP workflow. Version 1 included the availability of a requisition application, a timesheet application, and a time and expense application, so that integration directly into payroll, into project accounting from a time perspective, and a requisitioning functionality were added. And for those of you that have been exposed to Dynamics GP for some time, you may recognize that these applications are acting as replacements for tools that are available that were available prior using the business portal, which required SharePoint. So all of this functionality is going to be now built into the Dynamics GP interface. So anything from a GP batch approval to a vendor approval to an expense report approval, and then also some self-service functionality built into payroll will be available to you in the GP interface if you're using those pieces of the solution. I'm not going to demo until we're done with the slides, but I am going to spend a little bit of time showing you a couple examples of these screens and what they look like. And the other thing I'd like to say in regards to this, you're going to see some mention of self-service wrapped around payroll. Many of you may not know this, but with the release of Dynamics GP 2013 and now 2015, many of you will actually own the payroll and the human resources modules, and you may not be using them. So if you've been considering whether you should bring payroll in-house or whether you want to continue to outsource your payroll, this at least allows you to have the freedom of making a choice without having to buy additional software. Okay. So the next thing I wanted to talk about was a little bit, I have a question here I'm going to try to answer. So the question is single sign-on available if you're running self-hosted SQL? The answer to this, this functionality that we just talked about, it's actually based on using the Microsoft Cloud, so that is using Azure. So at this point, that isn't tied to a self-hosted or a outside provider. So I hope that answers your question there. Okay. So keep the questions coming. I certainly want to make sure we get as many of those answered as we can. Many of you may be taking advantage of some of the functionality that exists in regards to the Dynamics GP homepage. A new feature that was added to GP in 2015 was the ability to copy your settings from one user to another. So as you may notice here on my user setup window, we have the ability to assign a homepage role to the user when we set them up in the system. So I have that highlighted on the user setup window. You'll also then notice on the second window that I've highlighted here that we have the ability to copy users so that the user settings. So there's two things that we have the ability to copy. Number one is we have the ability to copy security access from user ID to user ID. We also then have the ability to copy homepage and area page access. So if someone is set up as an accounting manager role inside of Dynamics GP, you can add a new user and copy the access or the role from a particular user. The other thing that you have the ability to do is copy their content. So if they have certain shortcuts that they use on a regular basis and this user is going to need that same access, then you have the ability to copy that as well. So this is actually really good for onboarding and streamlining your individual employees' access to GP. All right. So for any of you that are on a GP 2013 or later, you're probably using the Management Reporter module. And most of you probably then launch Management Reporter from outside of Dynamics GP. So what has been added with this release is the ability to actually set it up so that you can have a navigation list that's available that will allow you to select your Management Reporter reports directly from inside of Dynamics GP. So then really Management Reporter, other than the design of the reports, becomes embedded inside your system. Most of our organizations that we work with have maybe one designer or two designers who are creating the reports, but everybody else is just consuming the information. And so this actually allows them to have a shortcut. They don't have to leave GP to get to the reports. Makes life a lot simpler for those users. So as you can see on the left, we have a setup window that actually will allow us to enable general ledger reporting. And on the right, you'll notice that there is a navigation list that has a list of all of the the Management Reporter reports. So you simply have the ability to select the report and view the report directly from inside of GP. There is one additional window that I did not include that's a setup window that basically just tells the system where in your infrastructure the Management Reporter setup is installed. So it's really a fairly quick and easy installation and setup that allows you to then build that functionality right inside of GP. All right, so that's the system-wide functions that we wanted to talk about. Our next step is actually to move a little further down the line into the financials features. So I'm going to go ahead and move forward. And so I don't know how many of you in the crowd actually are using Dynamics GP to manage more than one individual organization or entity within your GP. But I do want you to know that we have the ability now. One of the shortcomings, I guess. Okay, so we have a question. Joanna, it looks like you have a question, and we're going to unmute you. Okay. So Joanna asked a really, really good question. Her question was, can you also add criteria to your management report or reports? And using the functionality that we just discussed. And unfortunately, Joanna, I think that that functionality does not exist. Really, the functionality that's built in here is really for people to be able to print the reports, not necessarily to edit the reports. And then another question just came up. It's from Don. Don, will the recorded version of the session be available for viewing? And the answer to that is yes, and we'll make sure that you're aware of how to get to that. So thank you for the questions. So back to the intercompany functionality enhancements. So for those of you that have multiple entities managed inside of Dynamics GP, you know that for some time there has been intercompany functionality, so that, as an example, I have the ability to enter a payables transaction and allocate the cost of a vendor invoice across multiple companies. However, the weakness in GP was if I wanted to see the details or wanted to drill back into those transactions or do an inquiry, I couldn't drill across companies. I couldn't do an inquiry across multiple companies. I could only see it within the one that I'm in. And so one of the new features that has been added is an intercompany journal entry inquiry, so that you can actually see the companies affected by a particular journal entry. The other thing is that you have the ability to void intercompany transactions. So what that means is, in the past, you would have had to go in, void your transaction, go over to the other company and make it an adjustment as well. Now, this void functionality will actually cross companies for you, so that it will save you time and effort, while still giving you the ultimate same result that you wanted, which is the transaction being voided in the appropriate organizations that you're managing. All right. So the next financial feature that we wanted to talk about, oh, we have another question. Okay. So I think Eileen has a question. Eileen, do you want to type that in, or do you want to ask it? We have you unmuted. Okay, we'll just get to that one later then, if the question still exists. All right. Anyway, what has been added now is for your receivables and your payables functionality that uses payment terms. There's been some adjustments to the payment term functionality that expands its functionality. So now you have the ability to actually change a due date, have a due date option using the transaction date or the due date. So your due date, the transaction date or the discount date. You also have the ability to add days to a due date. So the ability to do this then gives you a lot more flexibility in regards to calculating due dates within the system. Okay, I do see that I have a question. The question is intercompany an add-on module within GP or part of the 2013 version. So the answer to that is if you're on either business-ready licensing or if you're on the new perpetual licensing, the intercompany module is actually included in, and now with 2015 it's included in what's called the starter pack. In 2013 and prior it was included in what's called the business essentials group. And the only other thing that I'm not sure of that we could, I don't think that it's included in the professional or standard version that some of our clients are on, which is just the licensing model that they're on. If you update to 2013, if you're on 2013 though, you should have the intercompany module. It should be included. And really, it's easy to set up. It's probably one of the easiest modules in the entire system, because what it allows you to do is basically just create the do to, do from relationships between each of your entities, and then it will automatically create those do to, do from transactions when you enter an intercompany type transaction. The last thing to talk about with intercompany, though, to answer your question, is that the intercompany module really only functions with the general ledger and the payables management modules. So if you're thinking about intercompany for receivables or some other areas within the system, that would require that you get what we might call an independent software vendor or third-party vendor application, and there are actually at least a couple of those that exist. So hopefully that answers your question. So back to the payment terms, I guess I just wanted to give you a screenshot here to show you how the screen has changed. But you'll notice that you have additional flexibility in regards to calculating the due dates, also calculating the discount dates. You have the ability to add days. You have additional options in regards to, for instance, next month, months, month/day, and annual. So it just expands what your functionality was before and gives you the unique capability on a per vendor basis as you need to. And then lastly, on the financial side, in the fixed assets module, and some of you might be saying, why hasn't this been here before? But we'll say finally, we have the ability to actually print a report as part of the year-end close. It actually is included as part of the year-end close. So it prints for all books and assets that are impacted by the close. And it includes end-of-year information for each asset. So this may seem small, but yet for many of you it's probably very, very big. And so that's why we included it. Okay, so as we move along, I want to move into distribution functionality. And I just have a few things to talk about. There may be some of you that are actually leveraging emailing functionality out of Dynamics GP when you print invoices, and when you print purchase orders or statements, if you do payables, remittance advices, etc. And so I just wanted to make sure that you know that now you have the ability to email the historical documents as well. So whether it be invoices or purchase orders, like we talked about, we have the ability to edit and email a document that may be in history. So as an example, if somebody asks us to resubmit a purchase order or resend them an invoice that we've already sent out, then we'll have the ability to very easily email those and set up the appropriate contact and message as we need to. So this actually is a very practical new piece of functionality that's in GP 2015. All right, and so this is one of the new features that I think is long in coming, but you know, we have the ability to interact our purchase order module with our payables module. And so in the process of managing purchase orders, we have the ability to enter a purchase order. We have the ability to receive goods against that purchase order. And then we have a three-way matching functionality that goes along with that as well. So what happens is that sometimes people may not know that this invoice that they've received from a vendor applies to a purchase order. And if that's the case, we now have a warning message that will pop up. So if you're entering an invoice through accounts payable rather than purchase order invoice matching, then the system will actually tell you that so that you can go back into the appropriate place to enter your invoice. So this actually is a very practical piece of functionality that's been added as part of GP 2015. Now, I know there's a small minority of our clients that also use the invoicing module rather than sales order processing. And the invoicing module was not included in the release of the web client until GP 2015. So now for any of you that are considering using the web client and also use the invoicing module, that functionality now exists in the web client. And as you look at this screenshot, you may want to notice that for instance, if you're using invoicing, that this window looks very, very similar to the GP window that you use in your traditional client. And so for anyone considering maybe a more web-based approach to Dynamics GP, and we do have some clients that actually even have a mixed environment with some using the web and some using the traditional rich client, you're really not giving up functionality, and the maneuverability of the system is the same. All right. So the next thing that I wanted to go through is HR and payroll employee self-service. And so this functionality, for any of you that are using project accounting or are using payroll and HR, could be very important for you. And like I said before, for some of you that now own the payroll and HR modules may want to consider, is this something that would make sense for our organization? First one I wanted to start off with is the project employee expense report. And so what you'll notice here is that we have the ability to enter our expense reports that we would traditionally enter into project accounting, but send it through a workflow that is now available. So the project employee expense report and the project timesheet functionality that was released with Dynamics GP 2013 R2 are replacing the business portal time and expense and what was called the personal data keeper, or PDK. So this is far better technology, and it's all built into the GP interface. Now, I do want to talk a little bit about these workflow functions, because this may actually start to introduce users that were traditionally not using Dynamics GP as users into the GP interface. However, for self-service and for the project and the requisition type users, the cost for those licenses is significantly reduced versus the traditional concurrent user license that's available with Dynamics GP. So as you can see on this window, this is where I can actually go in, enter into a project. I can select the project, the item, and then send this into a approval process through the use of this submit button that you'll see right here. Okay, so as an individual approver, I actually have the ability to receive I can receive notifications a couple different ways. One way is on my home page under my to-do section, or secondarily, I can actually have email notifications that will tell me when these are due. So just keep that in mind, and that really is true for all of these types of workflows. Okay, I have a question here. The question is, does expense reporting require project accounting module? The answer to that question is yes. Jeff, thanks for asking that question. It does. Now, if you're interested in expense reporting without the use of project accounting, feel free to reach out to us, because we will be able to provide you with a couple different options in regards to regards to that. And many of those options actually include workflow functionality as well. So, Jeff, thanks for asking that question. So a couple other things. Now we're kind of getting into our payroll and HR side with some of these workflows. And so first of all, we have what's called the employee profile. So many employees during their length of service for you will have changes in their life. They may add an additional dependent through marriage, through the birth of a child, etc. They may change their emergency contact. And so there's a number of different changes that can occur. What this is allowing you to do is allowing an employee to view and edit their employee information. So an employee can then come in, they can use this screen to make an update to any of those pieces and then submit those changes for approval. So before the HR and payroll people fall off their chairs and think, oh my gosh, what a mess this could cause, this is a workflow, and it does require an HR and payroll touch at the end before it actually will update your records. So rest easy that this was built to save you time, but not to cause heartache. So keep that in mind. So some of the examples we talked about was address, dependents, emergency contacts. Also, an employee can see position history. So that actually can be very useful. So I'll actually spend a minute showing you some of the engine for the workflow, but this actually does require that you set up a workflow, but it absolutely allows you to route these approvals and these changes for approval, and then updates the system as the approval process occurs. All right. So as a manager in this case, if somebody makes an update to their profile, then you have the ability to view and edit your team members' data. So address, dependents, emergency contacts, position history, all of that is also available to you as a manager. Same be true with skill sets and training. So, and this really starts to get into updating your human resources module. So part of the self-service for employees to view and maintain their education and tests. So if you have individuals on your staff that are CPAs, that are technicians that, for instance, on our side that get Microsoft certifications and all that, they can actually go take a test, update their profile, and it will then be sent off to HR to update. So this again is all based on setting up a workflow function and routing. So manager skills and training, this allows an individual manager to see their employees' education and tests. Managers can view those skills and training history, and it's driven out of navigation lists. And I would be willing to bet that many of you on this call don't leverage navigation lists as much as you can, or even at all. And I encourage you to really look into how navigation lists can make it so much easier for you to get access to information. And this is just one example. Oh, we have a question. So this says, does this require setting up every employee as a GP user, and does their logging in use a concurrent user? That's a great question. I appreciate that question, Jeff. The answer is yes, they're all set up as users, but this is what I was talking about earlier with the self-service users. So it's a very limited scope. So employees do have to log in, and it does have limited access to just the screens that you've given them, and it's far more limited than even what a typical person would be given, and it just allows them to do self-service. So now some of these folks are going to be able to do this via the web client. In fact, that's the gist of it, is a lot of times this will be actually done via the web client if you choose to do it that way. And so the answer is yes, you do have to set them up, or there's really no way for us to track them. Another thing that's available if you're using payroll, and I hope that answered your question, Jeff. So another thing that if you're using payroll, employees have the ability to go in and self-service and see their, not only view, but print their pay stubs from a navigation list. So based upon their login, they're only going to see their records, and it will allow them to see each of their individual pay stubs, and it will allow them to print them out. This really, again, is replacing business portal functionality that existed before. And so the W-4 is another update that's available. And so an employee can edit their W-4 information and change the additional withholding. The reason I'm mentioning all this stuff is that this is all functionality that if you're using payroll or HR, that saves you as an administrator a significant amount of time and effort. It puts some of the burden of the change back on the employee, but yet you still control it. So the benefit to you is time savings and probably an easier and more secure way of keeping that information electronically, rather than maybe today it's all on paper or emails or those types of things. So it's more easily tracked. All right. Direct deposit updates are the same. And so this functionality allows them to update their direct deposit information and then send that in so that it can be updated in payroll. For those using payroll, this can be very important. Also, employee benefits. So Dynamics GP does have functionality to allow people to do open enrollment, and then also the ability to view their benefits that are in HR. All right, so I'm going to move on to another topic, and then I'm going to jump out and show you a couple of these pieces in GP. So the last thing I wanted to talk about was a companion app. And so I'm going to talk specifically about the Business Analyzer. This is a tool that I think there probably are very few clients that can't use this at some level. What this allows you to do is it allows you to get graphical metrics out of Dynamics GP, and you can actually surface that information in a variety of different ways. The latest release made that available on an iPad, an iPhone, or an Android. It's also available on a Windows phone. If you carry a tablet, such as I have a Surface, then you actually have the ability to have that on your Surface. And so it actually ties very nicely. Now, that's one way you can get it. If you're a GP user, the Business Analyzer can be embedded in your Dynamics GP interface. And if you're not a GP user, you also can have this as a desktop application. So this actually is a good way for you to be able to see information more clearly. So I'm going to jump out of the slide deck, and I'll come back to it in a moment. But what I wanted to do is I wanted to actually just real quickly jump into Dynamics GP. So here is the first viewing of the Business Analyzer. So we're going to talk about that first. So the Business Analyzer can be embedded in your home page. So you can see here that I have a payables aging, I have an inventory turnover metric, and I also then have a sales by territory metric. What's nice about these is these reports are actually based on SQL reporting services. You also have the ability to embed management reporter reports in here as well. So these kind of metrics can be role-based. So if I'm the VP of Sales and I use GP and I want to have it here, I can put it here. One other thing that I have the ability to do, and I'll show you this, and I have to launch it, so it's going to take just a second. I'll show you the desktop app. So this is what a desktop app would look like. You have the ability to actually set these up almost like a scrolling PowerPoint. So I've actually seen these types of this tool used in situations like where you may have a sales environment and you have a bullpen where the sales team sits, and these actually will scroll across one at a time. But and also these views can also be then role-based, so that the individual users that should see sales will see sales. The people who are working in payables or inventory will see just what they're supposed to see. So this is the second way. Now, the way I can't show you today is I have this also on my Microsoft phone, but you can also have this on an iPhone like we talked about, or you can also have it on an Android phone or tablet as well. So that's really what the Business Analyzer, now being cross-platform, because we know that we have a lot of clients that are iPad, have a lot of remote users or remote employees that use iPad in the field. And so this is going to be an easy transition, but yet still give them the proper information that they need to do their jobs. All right, so the next thing that I wanted to do is I wanted to scroll down a little bit on my screen and just show you a few things. So first of all, you'll notice that I actually have some workflow functionalities that are built right here. So in the release Dynamics GP 2013 R2, we released purchase requisitions and project time and expense. So today, in the first release, we released project time. And as you saw in the slides, we now have also released project expense. So we can actually enter an expense report directly into Dynamics GP through this interface with a limited user license, and then that can actually interface into project. For people entering time cards, we can do that, and that'll interface directly into our payroll module. So I just wanted to spend a couple minutes, and then we'll close up with any additional questions that you may have. In our setup windows in Dynamics GP, so I'm going to go to Administration. I have a whole new section that started in GP 2013 R2 that's called Workflow. I now have what's called Workflow Maintenance. And you can see that I now have a number of different workflows that I can set up. So I can do workflows on purchasing, but also financial, sales, payroll, and project. So on the purchasing side, I can set up a batch approval. I also can set up a vendor approval. So just to real quickly kind of show you how this works, you set up a workflow, and then you set up workflow steps. So on the workflow, and you can activate that, and I called it vendor onboarding, but you set up some things about, how this works. So do I allow the originator to approve? Do I always require at least one approver? Who's the approver? All of that kind of has to be set up. And then once I have it set up, then I can activate it. Now, in my case, what I've done is I've actually set up steps inside of my workflow where I have vendors that exist in the United States and those who don't. And so we have the ability to assign individual approvers based upon any criteria that we choose. So you can see here, action is required when the following condition is met, and then we can go in and define what those conditions are. So if we're territorial and this is sales, we could say we approve a customer that's in Chicago, this person does it. Those kind of conditions can all be defined. So I want you to feel comfortable that this can work out. And then the end result on this vendor one is then when I go into purchasing and I go to my vendor maintenance window, and I go to enter a vendor, I'm going to create a new vendor that is Cheryl Daniels. Oops. the idea is that you'll notice now that there is a submit button at the top of the screen that didn't exist before. So that submit button then allows us to send this vendor request through a workflow. I will not be able to enter an invoice or even do anything with this record until it's been approved. So this onboarding process for vendors is just one of the many different workflows that exist inside of GP. So then what I wanted to show you is at the end of the result, so if I go back here and go back to my home page, then one method for which I get notification on this is through my workflow task. And you'll notice here that I have a vendor approval, and I was asking to approve myself as a vendor. I'm also then going to write $1 million check to me. But then, you know, we can then go to the workflow and we can either approve or reject. So it's a new level of comfort, I suppose, and it eliminates any manual process that you may be using to do this today. Okay? So with that in mind, I think we have about 5 to 7 minutes left. And what I would like to do is give you the opportunity to ask any questions. And I'm going to go back to our PowerPoint. So here we go. All right, let's go down to the end. Sorry.
As questions are coming in, I'm just going to talk real quick about some upcoming things that we have in the pipeline. There are 2 web URLs on your screen right now, socius1.com/events and the Microsoft Dynamics promotions page. We've highlighted a few of them here. Wanted to let you know GPUG is offering a 15% off for their membership through March 13th. And we're actually holding a webinar on February 24th. You can find that on our site there at that link on your screen to learn more about that. So if you're interested in attending and learning more, to join that. And also, we wanted to mention there have been some questions on the new requirements for the Affordable Care Act. And Jeff will be doing a webinar on March 12th. That's again on our website. So make sure if you're GP payroll on an earlier version than 2013 that you attend, register for that one as well. And I think we do have some questions coming in now. So
it looks like Jeremy has a question in regards to, is there a limited number of people in the approval process? And you can build as many steps into the process as you need. However, I would recommend that you keep it as simple as possible, just to make sure that you know, it doesn't get too convoluted, just to make it easier for everyone involved. But there really is no limit in the number of steps or that's available within a workflow.
looks like we do have a hand raised. Kim, we're going to unmute you. Oh, it looks like. Kim, you may have to submit yours through the question box. It looks like you're not signed in with your PIN. And that's all the questions we have for now. Oh, here comes another one.
Kim, good question. Are there any reports that can be exported that show approval workflow for our auditors? You know what? That is a very good question. I haven't looked. So let's see if there is anything in that regard real quickly. So You stumped me on that one. I'm going to have to research that because I don't see a ability, but there may be a report for it that I just don't know where it is. So we'll make a note and we'll follow up with you. Jeff asked the question, are future development going to continue to be focused to Office 365 and Azure clients? Jeff, I think the answer to that is that there will be development in that direction just because technologically there's a movement of a certain population going that direction. But I would also tell you that there will be continued functionality adds to the GP core product regardless of the method for which you launch it. So if you're on a traditional client or if you're in the cloud, you know, the functionality should match. I will tell you that Office 365 integration with Dynamics GP can really be very vital. And Socius is developing some tools leveraging Office 365 and what's called Power BI. So for a reporting perspective and actually communication perspective, there will be continued development in that direction. So if you're embracing that internally, then that's great, but it's certainly not going to be required as a GP user to have that. I hope that answers your question. Thank you. Good.
Pull up your contact information.
Yeah. All right. So I think that we did a decent job of getting through everything that we wanted to cover in the 1 hour that we allotted. And so I guess I encourage you to reach out if you have any questions about today's presentation. You can see my phone number and my email address. You can also feel comfortable reaching out to the consultant that you work with on a regular basis as well. Either way, we want to make sure that you're comfortable with this presentation and any other things that you may have on your mind. So with that, unless there are any additional questions, I guess we'll say thank you and have a good afternoon.